This speaker has been recorded at an online meeting of Addictive Eaters Anonymous. You can email us at contact@aeainfo.org.
I'm Joanne, I'm an addictive eater. I've never shared my story online like this, and it is like a little bit weird. It's been a busy day today, so I actually haven't had a lot of time to think about it, which is good. But I do feel a little bit off, so God knows what's going to come out of my mouth tonight. I hope it makes sense. All I thought was, well, I just would hopefully help somebody that's new. And I guess that's what helped me when I came into a room full of people who all had a problem with food like me. I never knew that a program existed for anybody like me. I didn't think food was an addiction. All I could say is that I knew I was pretty odd, that I had felt different to everybody, different since I was a little girl. My mum told me that she thought that my problem started when my younger sister was brought home. Now, I had two older sisters. I was 18 months old when my sister was born. I went and stayed with an auntie when she was in the hospital with the baby. And when she came home, I was different. I don't think that's probably the case. I probably would have been different anyway. But I had my nose out of joint, and she said I was never the same after that. And although she had 4 children, I demanded all of the attention. Nothing she could do pleased me. Anything that whatever she did for me, it was the wrong thing to do. If she put pants on me, I wanted a dress. If she put a dress on me, I wanted pants. I think I made her life very, very difficult. And as I grew up, I'm pretty sure that I would have been diagnosed with attention deficit disorder. The things I did, you'd say I was just naughty. I was actually just naughty. And maybe I did want attention. I don't know. I think it's just because I probably felt that I could not be loved enough. And that went with me right through into my adulthood. It didn't matter what anybody did. They could not love me the way that I needed to be loved. I went through primary school, high school, being very self-conscious, really body conscious. Although I felt so odd inside, that difference and that loneliness, my friends would never have known that. I had quite a big group of friends, probably would have thought the kind of the cool kids in the group, in the high school, the ones that think they're a bit tough and can do, give a bit of cheek to the teachers and, not go to school sometimes and smoke down the field or in the toilets or, one of those groups. At the high school actually that Kay works at. And I ended up working at, and my kids all went there. And, it was because I never felt like I fitted in anywhere, but all my friends never knew that. They would have thought that I was just, that I was fun. But when I used to go home from school, often I would be really, really angry and not know why, or else I'd be really, really sad because I knew that I didn't fit in. So all of those feelings I put on, my dad wasn't there, he was always working and working late, but all of those feelings I put on my mum. I was difficult to live with. I didn't know how to be any different. And as I got older and went through high school, I think at high school was when I first started having counselling to try and find out what was wrong with me. And then as I got a bit older, even before I had children, and then after I had children, I was still searching and still going to counselling. All of that I thought was because I had a weight problem, which when I look back at photos, I didn't really have a weight problem. I had a thinking problem. I would have a good day depending on what the scales said and whether or not I could fit my clothes. I was very warped in my thinking. So there were times when I was a bit overweight and there was times where I was certainly underweight, but in my mind, I was always overweight. So if I drew a picture of myself, I always had really big backside, really big hips. I'd walk down the shops and I would look in the window as I walked past and I would be thinking, oh my God, I was thinking that my backside was going. I always had a bag that I would wear on one side of my shoulder so that on the roadside there was a bag so that people couldn't see these buttocks going. This is in my mind. Oh, it's tiring thinking about it. Then when I came back down the street, I'd have the bag on the other side so people couldn't see that. And then I would get home and get inside that house and think, oh my God, I'm not going out. I'm not walking down that street again like that. And, it was every single minute of the day and every day, that was what my life was like. When I had children, going to preschool, going to the school, having to walk them to appointments was just so hard because I'm paranoid. I hear people talk about, people that use drugs, meth, and smoke lots of pot and everything, and that when they stop using, they get this complete paranoia. I had that paranoia 24/7. It was just in me, and I didn't know how not to be like that, and it actually drove me mad. I thought that I was just always going to be unhappy. I'd go home from being with friends, being out for the night, couldn't get drunk enough, couldn't get stoned enough to just feel normal on a dance floor or in a room. And I used to go home and I used to cry. I think there's something really wrong with me, seriously wrong with me. And I didn't know what. And sometimes I would go to before I would go to sleep, I'd be there and I'd be thinking, tomorrow I'm going to be different. I'll wake up and I'm going to feel really good about myself. I'm going to have really good self-esteem. I'm going to be nice to people. I'm going to be nice to my kids. But the main thing was I was going to wake up and I was going to feel good about myself. I'd go to sleep feeling pretty sad, but a little bit hopeful. And then I'd wake up the next morning and something would happen very early in the morning and I would feel exactly the same, like I was a nobody, that everybody was talking about me. The real psychiatric illness that would be diagnosed in the DSM. And didn't know how to be any different because that was just how I always was. And then I started going to counselling, and the lady there, by that time I had 3 children. I'd had 3 children. I had 2 children, and I was about to go into a rehab centre, which I didn't even know at the time was a psychiatric hospital. Found out later, quite a few years later, that it was a psychiatric hospital. And I went in there. The counsellor sent me there because she said that I was a family member of an alcoholic, and that was the reason that I thought and felt the way that I did. My father was an alcoholic. My mother was a foodie. And I didn't blame my mum, but I blamed my dad. I really did believe the counsellor when I sat in many sessions, blaming him for how I was, punching the pillow, just really getting worked up. And she sent me to Queen Mary because she told me that I would end up with screwed up children and no husband if I didn't go and sort myself out as a family member. I did all of that, and I still ended up with that same thing, that same family, those same children. She didn't say that your children would be okay and you'd end up staying married. She said, you know, screwed up children. Well, I still went, and I was, one of my children were 2, and I was pregnant with, which probably I got out just with 6 weeks to go before I had that baby. And I went up there for 6 weeks, and it was the hardest thing that I ever did. I cried all the way up there, and I cried in there. And I cried when I sat in my room. I didn't want to go out and talk with anybody else. But when I was up there at Queen Mary, I was there with drug addicts and alcoholics and family members. And I really identified for the first time in my whole life with the other addicts that were there. Everything that they were talking about, everything that they felt, everything that they, the sense of hopelessness that they had, the loneliness, the self-hatred, the sense of isolation, everything that they talked about was everything that I had lived for years. I was there, you know, doing that family program, and somebody there talked about a food fellowship. She'd been in Queen Mary for the second time. She was going to AA, and she was my room buddy in the dorm. And she talked about this food fellowship. And at that time, you know, those really strong feelings of, you know, I'm pregnant, I'm sitting around a table with 4 people, rotating each week. You go up to get your food, you sit down, you want to go up for seconds. And the whole time I'm thinking, oh my God, I am so fat. These people are looking at me thinking, why is she eating when she is so fat? Why is she going up for seconds, which actually I hardly ever did? Why is she eating so much? In my warped thinking, I thought that everybody was thinking that about me. And why I thought they were thinking that I was so fat was because I was not far off having a baby. To me, that I didn't think there was anything wrong with that thinking. I was excited. The only reason I was excited about going up to that rehab was the thought that somebody was going to control my food and that I might actually lose weight. And again, I didn't think that was warped thinking, losing weight when I was pregnant. I just wanted to lose weight because I thought it would make me happy. I was walking out of that hospital down the main street in Hanna after meals and at night by myself, and I was getting a newspaper and I was buying food and I was putting it inside the newspaper to get it back to the room so that I could eat it by myself. And I had a lot of guilt and shame about that. I hated doing that. I didn't know why I did it, but I couldn't not do it. And I was petrified that people were going to find out that I was doing that. And I left there after 6 weeks, getting up to doing my step 4 there and then having to share it while I was there, but not really understanding anything about that. All I understood was that I grew up in an alcoholic home. That was my problem. The other people there who were addicts and alcoholics had this disease of addiction. Yes, I was weird and yes, I related, but I didn't think I had a substance. So I was kind of like frustrated and not, you know, kind of like still sitting on the outside and not really being able to absolutely feel like I was home. So I came out of there and I had that next baby and I went to Al-Anon for probably around about a year. And then I can remember just that self-hatred, you know, it never left, you know, wanting to be, you know, I was proud of my babies, you know, proud of my children, loved them to bits, was good with babies. And I wanted to be able to enjoy them, you know, how you can really have that maternal, you know, that bond and you love them and everything, that you have patience and You can handle them crying and your sibling rivalry, and you manage that, and you're very patient, and you read to them, and you can handle all of that. Well, I wasn't doing that. I was so caught up in myself, and as my the younger ones started to get to toddlers and everything, I was yelling at them and I was swearing at them, and at times I'd throw things, I'd get in these fits of anger, and I just would hate that about myself, and pray like anything not to do that, and do it again the next day. Now, it wasn't like that every single day, but there's times that I'd look back there and I was like that, and I didn't know how not to be like that. And I still felt like, I was sitting there at Al-Anon, the people there were talking about, they were talking about the same personality as what I had, but they were also talking about their partners who were behaving really poorly in the home. I was behaving really poorly in the home, but it was more than that. Like, I just felt like there was something more. And I can remember looking in the mirror and just feeling that self-hatred, overweight, psoriasis covering my body, tired and exhausted from having a baby, not managing, in a family home. And I remembered the girl talking to me about the food fellowship and what she had done. And I looked it up in the phone book and rang the phone number. And two girls came and seen me, two young women came and seen me, and they started talking about what they'd found in this fellowship. They weren't consumed with getting on and off the scales. They weren't eating from a craving, like they were free. They weren't angry all the time. They weren't full of self-hatred. I could see that they were free. And when they talked about what life was like for them, I started moving to like that sense of hope. I kind of had hope when I went into the rehab, and hope, a little bit more hope when I went to Al-Anon, that things were going to get better. I was going to be able to be the person that I wanted to be. And then when I talked to those two women, I got a little bit more hope. And then when I came to a meeting and people started talking, I just knew, like it just consumed me. Even talking about it now, I can feel it within myself, that sense of relief. And oh my God, people absolutely know what it is like to struggle with this disease every second of the day, every single day, and not know how to get out of it, because no amount of counselling, no amount of anger management, no amount of that positive self-talk and pinning things on my mirror and trying to tell myself how much I love myself, none of that worked for somebody like me. It might work for others, but it doesn't work for me. Somebody that's got this disease, and that actually what I need to do is completely get out of myself. And how do you do that? Like, how do you just decide one day, or sit with counsel and get out of yourself? I know that the whole time when I was sitting with counsellors, it was about me thinking about how hard it had been for me, what my father had been like, what my household had been like. But actually, I was in a household that wasn't okay, and I needed to be thinking and trying to find how to get out of that. And it was by removing the poor me's and actually allowing a higher power to do for me what I can't do for myself. I've been reading about our opening up our channels, chakras, and how they can be closed, and how it gives some really good examples. And one of the examples is about, you know, those feelings that you get when you feel all joyous and free and happy, when you fall in love with somebody. And you have all these feelings and you feel really great, and, you know, it lasts for a long time till they say something that you don't like. And then it's like, start to shut down. You don't say anything. Say something else and you shut down a little bit more. And all by choice, with our thinking, you know, we're closing those channels. And it talks about another example of how, you know, you can think that you've just got absolutely no energy, you're feeling down, life's really hard, and you don't want to get up, and you don't want to go to work because somebody's kind of criticised something that you've done, so you don't like your job and you're going to leave your job, and, you know, all of a sudden, you know, something really positive comes up and you get really praised in your job and you think, great, it's the greatest job I've had. Or, you know, that person that you really had all these feelings about, you know, apologises and comes to you and say, you know, I was really wrong with what I'd done. I know that what I said, and all of a sudden you open up again and you're feeling all good again. And, you know, I know that is resentment. And, you know, it talks in the book about, you know, it being a choice and how we can either, you know, choose to be open, and how you've got to really work at that, but it is a choice. And once you start feeling those feelings of joy and hope, that you want to have those feelings more and more. And I remember when, you know, before I came to this fellowship, that I was such a jealous person, and my ex-husband used to say to me, no, you can't love anybody else if you don't love yourself. It used to really annoy me, because for one, I thought, how the hell does a man know that? And then the other thing was, I was thinking, how the hell do you know? And why are you telling me that? And I was having this conversation with my oldest son a couple of days ago, actually, and talked to him about the same thing as what I felt. And the reason that I didn't know what my ex-husband was talking about was because I had never experienced that feeling of being happy and comfortable and loving myself. I didn't know what that felt like. And when he was saying that, I had no clue what he meant, because I had never felt like that. And then when I come into the fellowship and started to get freed up from myself and my own thinking, and that obsession to eat was removed, those feelings of that self-hatred started to fall away. And for the first time, I started to actually be comfortable with myself. And actually, I don't mean love myself as from the outside, but actually love myself from the inside and not have all that self-hatred. And that was the only time that was at that point that I realised what my ex-husband was meaning. And until then, I just didn't even have a clue. So it's, you know, it's taken quite a while in this fellowship for all those feelings for me to start understanding those feelings. You know, I ate for the first 2 years, 2 years at least, it would have been, when I came into this fellowship. And I knew that I had a problem with food and that I couldn't stop eating. But all the knowledge in the world and in my head did not get me to a place where I was able to stop eating. And still I didn't know that it was, you know, a higher power that was going to stop me from eating and remove that obsession. I still thought it was me, and that actually I could do it. And, you know, it took more eating. It took a lot more eating and a lot more of being beaten. And I can remember sitting in meetings and having to say that I'd eaten again. And the shame around having to say that and thinking that I was never going to get this program was actually really scary. And I'd leave the meeting and I'd feel really sad. And I couldn't get home from the meeting without eating. You know, I'd go into McDonald's and I'd buy 3 flavours of ice cream sundaes and sit down the road from home in Kaiapoi, and I'd eat them all. And I'd go home and, you know, think that Wayne would know that I had, food all around my mouth, and then I'd make the school lunches and I'd eat half the baking. And that was after a meeting, after 4 meetings a week. Like it didn't matter that I went to 4 meetings a week, and it didn't matter that I was trying to do everything that I heard others doing. It still didn't stop me eating. And at that point, the obsession hadn't been removed from me, that I knew that this fellowship was the only thing that was going to help me, that the people in the fellowship they were the ones that were going to help me with their message. And I kept on coming because I knew there was nothing else. And then finally one day, I had the want to not eat more than the want to eat. And, that obsession was removed that day, and I haven't had that back. And that was when my youngest one, who's 22 and a half, was 6 weeks old. So, it's a wee while. And, they just don't know me as a mother who was drinking or eating. They've never actually seen me eating fish and chips or ice creams and all the stuff that I used to love. But they still seen, this crazy woman with a crazy head. And sometimes it still rears its head. But they always do. They come and they talk to me, and they ask for advice, and they ask me, about their kids, and they ring me and happy to talk to me, and we have some really good times. And tomorrow I've got my youngest grandson's first birthday, and it will be an opportunity to really work this program and pause without saying anything and not react to anything, because sometimes I find it hard, excuse me, when I am around my family. I've got 2 sons that have this disease and 2 that don't. And it's the oldest son who is very, very sick with this disease and is on a bender every week, has just lost another job. It's just about homeless again. But still, it is not bad enough. And of course, he's not invited to the birthday party tomorrow. And I don't even know if he knows about it. And, I find those sort of things hard, because family is like really precious to me. And every time when they're together, I take photos, and I take photos because I just, I had that thought in my mind that one day he's actually not going to be there. So I take photos, and I know in the back of my mind, I take photos because I feel like one day they're not all going to be there to take photos. I just know that the only thing that I can do is keep doing what I'm doing, and there is nothing else that I can do. I can't talk him into anything. I can't make him see this program and that what he can have, and that it doesn't have to be a struggle. He knows it's here, but he doesn't want it. So definitely hoping that it's going to be a good day tomorrow, and hoping that I can show that I am different. So it's really good to be here, and thank you all.